All right, so let's get into breaking down the regions, starting off with the East region. I don't know if you guys agree. I mean, I feel like this is kind of a term that gets popularized in a lot of soccer tournament conversations, but if I had to pick a region of death, it really does feel like this East region. Top seeds, obviously Duke at the 1, UConn at the 2, St. John's and Northern Iowa in the 5 and 12 matchup, and then Kansas the 3 seed, Michigan State. Kansas the 4 seed, Michigan State the 3 seed, rounding out that top part of the table, and then 6 Louisville. Just a very, very strong all-around group. Riley, for you, I mean, who are the real difference makers that kind of jump out in this bracket for you? Obviously, you got Duke, the number 1 overall seed, but who else?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you mentioned it being really top heavy. It's hard to ignore UConn. It's hard to ignore Kansas, of course. I think the thing that jumps out for me is St. John's at 5. Of course, it was a weak year in the Big East, but them sort of grabbing the regular season and the conference championship title. You kind of thought maybe they'd be a little higher seeded coming in, and I'm sure they'll take that sort of as a little bit of a chip on their shoulder and feel like they can't make a run and maybe meet up with Duke. A little bit later in the bracket, but some exciting mid majors here who I think could win a game or two here. I know Louisville has some injuries. I haven't seen a ton of them this year, but I think South Florida will have a good chance to match up against them. I love what Brian Hodgson's doing down there. I was lucky enough to cover them this year, and just a team that I think is really impressed in the American. And Cal Baptist too, for those who aren't too familiar with the eccentric scoring of Dom Daniels, and a tough draw in the first round there against Kansas, but I think the sort of March Madness sort of grapples onto one player every year, and if Cal Baptist makes some noise in the first round here, I think Dom Daniels could definitely be the guy whose fans sort of latch onto. I mean, averaging 20 points per game, one of the leading scorers in the nation, just a guy who's a ton of fun to watch, and definitely someone I think fans who are tuning into that 4-13 seed game are going to enjoy getting a look at. So yeah, a couple exciting mid majors here. You mentioned it, Sam, really top heavy, which I think makes it tough for maybe someone to get a big run here, but excited to see how it plays out for St. John's. I think that 8-9 matchup between TCU is exciting, and what Jamie Dixon's been able to do of late. So yeah, real top heavy East, but some solid mid majors here too that I'm definitely going to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, a big conversation. Talking about St. John's specifically. That I've been seeing a lot is talking about teams that might be underseeded and teams that might be overseeded. And one that's kind of gone up for debate here is obviously St. John's being in the region with UConn, lower than UConn, in a year where they beat the Huskies 2 times, one of them being most recently in the Big East Championship game. DeRosa, obviously you're one of our hosts for the fantastic Road to the Garden pod. You follow this conference very closely. We've talked about this matchup, me and you specifically, a lot this past week. Do you feel like St. John's getting a lower seed than UConn is fair?
Yeah, if St. John's wanted a better seed, they should have done anything in the non-conference.
Yeah.
Like, they should have won those games. Like, they blew a huge lead to Auburn, if I remember correctly, and the Auburn team didn't end up making the tournament.
Yep.
Should have just won that game. Don't lose dumb games in the non-con. You could be a better seed. They were a very good team when it ran out in conference play. And I also just think they match up with UConn very well. Like, just the way they're able to put pressure on the ball. And just, it really took UConn on all like the intricate actions they want to run. I just think they're a good matchup, and they're able to out-athlete the rest of the Big East, which was a very down year for the league. Yeah. I don't know. I think if they wanted to be a better seed, they should have done something, in the non-conference before we got to conference play. They finally were able to beat UConn 2 out of 3 times.
Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously St. John's, by nature of being the 5 seed, they kind of fall into what a lot of bracket makers like to feel like is the general trap game, right? 12 seeds do have, a history of taking down 5 seeds. Against Northern Iowa, where could St. John's possibly slip up? And where do you feel like maybe their advantages might outweigh a 12-5 upset in this region?
I think Northern Iowa is going to keep this game very competitive. I think Northern Iowa could win. They're, of the 12 seeds, I think they're the most likely. We will talk about the other ones later, of course. But I think with this Northern Iowa team, what they do really well is they're a pack line defense, right? They don't give up like any paint touches, which is how St. John's wants to beat you. And they really slow the game down, which is St. John's wants to beat you in transition. If Northern Iowa is able to control the game doesn't get out in transition, St. John's half-court offense is mediocre. It's fine. And another thing Northern Iowa does very well is they force you to shoot threes. St. John's, they have more shooters this year with Isaiah Sellers. He's been in and out of the lineup lately. Josen Sanon, who every single time. It was that weird clip in the press conference. He says his threes is Coke, butter, cheese. So it's Coke, butter, cheese whenever it goes in. And then Ian Jackson also in and out of the lineup completely. Those guys are going to have to hit shots if St. John's is going to win this game. Northern Iowa is going to double down on Zuby. They're going to do everything they can to prevent paint touches. And, yeah, if you want to beat them, you have to hit threes. And another thing St. John's does is, they press you full game, right? It's a ton of size, length. Northern Iowa's starting guard is Trey Campbell. He's 6'4". Mm-hmm. Like, he's not going to be phased by that size and length. And he's a veteran. He's seen this before. Maybe he hasn't seen it to this extent. If he's turning the ball over, I think this is kind of a St. John's blowout. But if he's not, and Northern Iowa is controlling the pace of this game, and it comes down to half-court execution, they're going to be live in this game. And one of my favorite players, I'd almost say in the country, Leon Bond, he's a wing. He's athletic. He was brought over by Virginia originally out of high school. I think he was kind of brought over to play that DeAndre Hunter role that they had, just to be that guy off the bench who would eventually evolve into that starter. He wasn't as good as DeAndre Hunter, obviously, but I think that dude is a pro's pro. He is long. He does literally everything you could ask him to. I think Northern Iowa was very live in this game. I think this is a bad match for St. John's.
Yeah, absolutely. According to Ken Palm, Northern Iowa is the third best defense in the country when it comes to guarding the three. Riley, another mid-major that I really like here, not necessarily like to win, but just one that I really am excited to watch, North Dakota State against Michigan State. Obviously a FCS powerhouse that's recently making the jump to FBS for all the college football fans here. What could fans who are not really familiar with this North Dakota State team take into this first week of tournament action?
Yeah, incredibly balanced team. I think quite literally they're top 130 in offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency, pretty even in both those categories in terms of KenPom. And they sort of tore through conference play late in the season. I'm pretty sure they only picked up 2 losses in conference play, at the very least from January to February. Tore apart the conference tournament and beat most of their opponents by double-digit margins outside of the conference championship game. And sort of ran through the Summit League this year. So it's a really good two-way team. Trayson Anderson for them, he's been fantastic. He gets a high usage percentage there, but he's efficient with the ball. He gets on the boards really well because he brings a ton of size and physicality at 6'9". But a youthful guy who maybe hasn't quite been in a situation like this yet. So excited to see what they can do. Obviously, a Michigan State team, that's always going to be a tough matchup for, a young and experienced team, but North Dakota State, not a team we haven't necessarily seen, in March before, but, going on to have I'm pretty sure one of their best seasons in program history with 27 wins. So yeah, just again, a tough matchup. I like what they're able to do, during the regular season, in conference play, just again, 2 losses, 27 wins overall, Summit League regular season champs and conference tournament champs. Again, drawing sort of a tough matchup here. With Michigan State, but yeah, keep an eye out for guys like Damari Wheeler-Thomas, probably their leading scorer, really eccentric scorer, a little bit of an undersized guard, but sometimes those are guys who make a little bit of magic in March and almost shooting 40% from 3-point range. So he's a guy who is going to hopefully be able to keep pace offensively for them. And again, they'll rely on a guy like Trayson Anderson inside to sort of hold down the physicality against a Michigan State team that is pretty well coached and is always going to be a challenge, whether it be inside and tough and physical and everything like that. But yeah, to your point, Sam, it's always going to be an uphill battle for sort of that 14 seed to make an upset, particularly against a team like Michigan State in March with Tom Izzo and everything that goes into that. But a lot of size, a lot of physicality in a historic season for a North Dakota State team. They run a solid offense as well, not particularly with a ton of pace, but just a ton of overall balance and two-way solidity on both ends of the floor for them. So it'll be a tough matchup, but a North Dakota State team that people should definitely tune into and keep an eye on because they can score with the best of them when they need to. And they're when they're playing at their best, they absolutely ran through Summit League conference play this year.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a great breakdown of this North Dakota State team. Final question before we move on to the next region. Obviously, like I said at the beginning, so many top 25 teams in this one region alone. Should fans of whoever comes out of this region be a little bit worried that they might be a little bit tired going into the Final Four? Obviously everyone gets, 5-6 days of rest before, between the Final Four and the Elite Eight. But, is this possibly the toughest region to come out of DeRosa?
Toughest, I'd say, sure. I mean, obviously, it depends on how the bracket shakes out, right? Like,
Totally.
depends on how the games go. I really think is the real answer to that question. But I mean, it's definitely going to be. It's never easy to win 4 games against high quality teams. Like even for a team like Duke, let's say they beat CN in the first round, of which they should, right? You're playing either Ohio State, who has been on fire lately, or TCU, who has played up to Michigan, Florida, I believe they beat Iowa State, and Texas Tech. Like they've played up to those teams, and then after that, Kansas is Darren Peterson, who could be the number 1 pick in the draft. St. John's, we just saw beat UConn, dominate UConn twice. Like it's not going to be an easy road. And then you got to play UConn, a team who's won 2 titles, or Michigan State, a team who plays everybody well. UCLA, maybe team. I mean, if Donovan Dent's on, one of the best guards in the country. Like
if they're happy about their travel, accommodations.